So, okay, welcome to the July 9th Working Group Component Standard meeting. Seems like we have a few agenda items today. So let's just jump into the notes here. So the first thing on the list is Ross's component config validation and conversion migration stuff. So is Ross here?
Yeah. Yep. So this actually was raised as a question due to, like, in kubeadm we are actually trying to migrate away from using the internal types for component configs, and this is actually causing us some issues. So we lose the ability to verify and migrate component configs, and we're actually looking forward to figure out what to do. And currently we have like a couple of options. The first option is to move the, like, just for the component configs, move the verify and conversion code inside the public types. So for example, have a conversion that's supposed to convert all of the legacy component configs for certain API groups into the latest version, and also provide some verify methods to verify the latest version of this component config. This is option one, and option two is to have an additional command line, either subcommands or options that are going to be easily embeddable inside the components. And these are going to provide verify and migrate functionality, and probably some other options that I didn't think of. So what do you guys think?
To summarize, the issue is that you want to be able to upconvert people's kubeadm configs across multiple different versions of the underlying components, but without the internal types for those component configs, you don't get the conversion function.
Yes, those are the component configs. We want to upgrade to always the latest version. That's because you can have a component, for example, you can have the kubeproxy, which today has only v1 alpha 1, but like in the next version it can have v1 alpha 1 and v1 alpha 2, and we need to upgrade at some point to v1 alpha 2, because if we don't do that,
so I would caution, like, let's talk about beta and GA types, because alpha types aren't required to have conversions. So that's not necessarily going to work, right?
Yeah, that's probably going to be the same for from alpha to beta or between beta versions. If we don't do upgrade at some point by the cluster provisioning tool, we're going to lose the ability to have a upgrade that's in place.
Yeah, I think I understand what this needs to look like. Like, this needs to be primed before kubeadm even operates on like any of the configs or clusters or starts mutating things. Like, it needs to check all of the API versions depending on what the target cluster upgrade is. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, but
and the reason why, one of the like simple cases why we would need this is because of, like, if you change a default and the user has not overridden the default in, say, alpha 2, right, and then in beta 1 we change like requests per second to like 150, then you would want them in their new, cluster deployment to receive the new default. But this should probably be ignorable as well, since, I mean, like, it almost fits into like the pre-flight check.
So let me approach this from a different angle. So in Kubernetes, there's a generic problem where we don't have tooling to migrate user manifests. So if somebody creates a configuration for kubeproxy, it doesn't matter if it's alpha or beta. if something changes in the next release and they want to migrate, we don't have tooling for that. So they have to edit manually. And basically what Ross is asking is, should we have this, as a standard command for kubeproxy, like kubeproxy migrate my config, please?
Yes, we can actually even extract it further and provide it as just a simple function inside the component base code, and have components that wish to have this functionality just call that function and register that subcommand for them.
Right. And so I guess another interesting thing is, so there's a couple questions. One is kind of like, how much should kubeadm be trying to do for people? And I have to go look at, it's been a while since I looked at kubeadm and kind of where it's at. So my judgment might not be the best on that. But like historically speaking, the conversion logic has been a feature of the component that's, providing the public config API. So if there are conversions available, say kubelet has v1 beta 1 and v1 beta 2, you should be able to hand kubelet a v1 beta 1 or a v1 beta 2. And so I guess the question is, like, why does kubeadm necessarily need to?
I can answer that if that's your full question.
Let's start there.
So the reason is because when you look at the previous application of the Kubernetes API, right, is to interact with the API server, or to be interacted with through the API server.
Right.
And the API server has a storage backend, which means that as you're upgrading the API server and going through different schemes, that the target versions for storage are going to be changing, which means that as a user, if I'm using old API types, then they are going to be auto upgraded as they go into the storage backend, and even downgraded, if you do certain things. And that allows you to have a solution moving forward. The user has to change the way that they're interacting with the API server eventually, but the cluster itself has a way to persist that object. Mm-hmm. And so it's not completely different from what kubeadm is doing, but it's a little bit, because kubeadm has to decide how the object gets stored and persisted across cluster upgrades, which means that we need to have pre-flight checks beforehand, where kubeadm's like, whoa, I'm not even going to touch that config file because the kubelet doesn't work with that thing anymore.
Right.
And
I see.
And then also provide.
How do you avoid always being on the oldest thing? Is really the question.
Yeah, we need to provide a faculty for the user to, like, the simplest behavior is probably to receive a warning, right, that you need to upgrade your configs and that you can run kubeadm config migrate.
Yeah, I mean, the tricky thing is, especially like, say someone's running like GitOps with kubeadm,
mm-hmm.
and they write a file that's in like the oldest version, and say even if the kubelet was just like the API server automatically up converting that version internally, and say it like overwrites whatever file they provide on disk to be the latest version, how do you propagate that back up through to kubeadm or to the like Git repo that someone's running GitOps in?
I would imagine that we would, so if we need to keep my suggestion yesterday is, if we keep the conversion logic in the components because of its dependence on the internal type, then we should have a standard CLI that is importable from the component base.
Just like a convention
and then basically we could also provide a library as well, or some helper functions from component base for installers to then shell out to these tools.
Mm-hmm.
Since installers for the most part are going to have access to all of the up-to-date cluster binaries.
Right. So like, I guess the question is kind of how to provide that functionality. One way to do it is like the first option, right, which was just actually vendor the internal types too, and like say, look, don't use the internal types directly, but they're part of this library for conversion. Is that right?
Well, they don't need actually to be the internal types. You just need to provide some sort of conversion that's going to work not on the internal types, but on the public types.
Sure.
Just provide conversion functions from from any of the older types into the the newest version.
Yeah, I guess either of those would be fine. The generated conversions all work through the internal types still, I think, right? So
Yeah.
they might have to there if we want the generated ones. So that's one option. And the other one, I guess, was having sort of like a conventional flag on each component that does the conversion.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that okay? So that one. So I guess the trade-offs are like, for option one, it requires you to vendor like the whole scheme, and for option two, it requires you to actually have the component binary available. So I think option one is probably lighter weight. Option two has the advantage that you are calling into something that was actually released and like is consistent and at the same version that you're going to use. So
Yes.
that's worth thinking about.
So for kubeadm, like it doesn't matter too much between option one and option two, but some of the other tools actually don't vendor in any of the public types. They simply operate on YAML strings.
And also, if you're using basically the control plane and static pods, it means that you're downloading an image. You're not downloading a binary, so you have to execute the conversion inside the image.
Yes, so we have to like spin up a simple container, but we have the access to the CRI tooling. We can spin up one of something to just convert the YAML file or validate it.
Does it even need to be a container? I mean, that's obviously the most isolated way to go, but
well, currently for kubeproxy and stuff that's basically run as a daemon set, we only have images. We don't have the binaries itself. But for the kubelet itself, we can actually execute the binary directly.
I would also guess that in most cases, people aren't going to have the Kubernetes component binaries in their path on their system, so it's going to be hard to just shell into it as you would typically.
Yeah.
okay, so it's very simple then. We just need to kick off a distributed execution in the Kubernetes cluster to then we just need to schedule a job, right? That then creates pods that have a service account with RBAC role privileges to write config maps to the cluster in the same namespace. And then we can asynchronously read the config map.
Yeah.
Does anyone like that idea?
Complicated quickly. So
Very nice.
Sounds simple enough.
yeah, I think I probably favor just being able to vendor a library that can do the conversion. I need to go back. I saw some stuff in the Slack. It looked like some people were having some arguments about whether we should do that or not. So I need to go follow up on that, I guess.
Problem is that
had some objections.
the users themselves are going to face a problem because someday the V1 Beta 1 for the kubelet is going to go away. If somebody is going to be stuck on the old config version, they have to have a way to migrate.
Right. Well, typically what we've said is, look, you need to go read the release notes and you need to write a V1 Beta 2 config. And there's a window where you can do that migration manually. And that technically works. It's not very complicated. It just requires people to do a manual thing. And so, now the question is like, can we actually automate that? If we have conversions, technically we can, and it's just a question of, how do we do that? How do we expose that to our tooling?
Yeah, in kubeadm we already have a command, but that is specific for the kubeadm types. We have a migrate command.
Yeah, but we also can do an automatic upgrade of provided that the kinds are actually the same. So you just switch the version, but maintain the kinds the same. You can do the same for component configs, and this will be relatively seamlessly.
And so I guess, yeah, another thing we're asking is, where should the burden be? Like, should it be on kubeadm to go figure out what these conversions should be, on the behalf of kubeadm's users, and then just do like public type conversions inside of kubeadm? Or, should the components be providing that functionality for anybody to use? I think like it's kind of clear that there's a lot more value if the component just exposes it rather than putting all that on kubeadm. So I think that this is probably something we should do from the component side.
Like not always. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's widely documented how to wget the proper version of your Kubernetes binary, nor
right.
Yeah, and you'd have to do some convincing, right, for owners of those docs.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, like let's have people download a kube proxy, kube scheduler, like
no. So like what I'm saying is like kubeadm could figure out how to do all the type conversions itself, right? Like the APIs are public.
Yeah.
Figure out what all of those things mean, and you could code that into kubeadm and have it just be part of that tool and a benefit of that tool. Or we could say actually components are responsible for providing the automated conversions between their types. And then kubeadm would just consume that. And I think the latter is like the better way to go, because it doesn't put the burden on kubeadm to figure all that out for every component, which is just kind of insane.
Yeah.
And it also lets other tools consume the same functionality.
So the logic is that would be in component base and then like vendored into kubeadm would be like, oh, here's the preferred GVK.
Well, it would probably be in each component's like API staging repo.
Yeah.
So like kubelet has some staging repo, right, for its config, I think, and so.
Well, that'll be the logic. Are we just going to generate the same thing for each one?
Well, yeah. I mean, what I'm saying is like there's, kubelet and kubeproxy already have conversions.
So would there be a function like convert v1 alpha 1 to preferred?
Yeah, there's something like that. I can't exactly remember.
Because if I remember correctly, all the conversion functions are version specific, which means something needs to decide like what to go to.
Yeah, I have to go look and see. Once you have like a scheme registered with a bunch of versions on it, I think there's a way to say
you can get the preferred version,
right? Because you can pass a preferred version to the API server.
Yeah.
In your request for an object, right? So there must be a way to do that.
Yeah, Lucas has a pretty simple example of this from last year about using the conversions. Are we fuzzy on? Yeah, normally when I think conversion function, I think external to internal type. Do we need to change something in like conversion gen?
So I think I mean, if you go to the internal type, you should be able to go out to any other external type. So
Yeah, it's just that the internal types are not in the external repos. So you need a vendor Kubernetes.
Right. So I'm wondering if we should change that and
Just keep
also,
everything.
Yeah,
out.
also export the internal types, but
Uh-huh.
like provide enough structure that people don't use them directly.
Ooh.
I think that we can actually do without exporting the internal types. The code generator for the conversion routines is like it's able to be pointed to a version that's going to be used to convert to. So if that's not the internal type, but the latest version, it's probably going to work well enough. And I think that this is probably like implementing this is going to be happening on a per component base. So people are going to probably backlash on this if we are actually asking them to expose their internal types, because that way they may lose the ability to like do whatever they want with the internal types.
So you would just propose having generations for all the external to external types? We need downgrades as well as upgrades.
Yeah. So my question is, does that require us to then go write? So does that require us to eliminate the internal types from the components as well if we want the same conversion machinery used for tooling as the components are using when they read config? And then B, does that require us to go write manual conversions for every pair of available types?
Not every pair. Probably we should do just the latest like stable config, latest released config. And
it has to be able to go backwards. So
yeah, so it's so basically if we have v1, v2 and v3, everything is going to be convertible to v3. So for example, if you want to convert from v1 to v2, you just need to convert from v1 to v3 and then from v3 to v2.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that may require changes to like the pre-existing conversion logic. Which
still don't
relies on that hub and spoke to go directly to the internal and then to an arbitrary external.
Yeah, I don't like it. It does make the case smaller to only worry about like latest and n-1, but you still could have like if you are supporting 7 different API versions in the component, like, and half of those have changes, then you need to write conversion functions, additional ones for 4 of those directly to the latest without having the internal type as a hub.
Well,
the only thing I can think
just have a linear conversion, right, where you just go 1, 2, 3 or 3, 2.
You would need different versions of the library if you didn't want to maintain all of the independent functions in order to do a linear one, like as a user, right? Like I would need to have an older version of like the kube proxy binary or something that's vendoring an older version of the library.
As long as your thing has understands all of the versions you are trying to use, you're okay, right? You could have one version of the thing that has 3 config versions.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't write a conversion, say the latest is alpha 3 and you are supporting alpha 1 and alpha 2, right? Like you can't get back from alpha 2 to alpha 1 unless you write something directly for that conversion.
You can go 3 to 2 and 2 to 1, right?
Well, that's what we were suggesting though, right? Is to not have to maintain like every different combination.
Well, that's not every combination. It's just like pairs next to each other. Right. So at least you don't have to have like a 3 to 2 and a 3 to 1 and a 2 to 1. You just have to have the 3 to 2 and the 3 to 1.
Yeah, that is a smaller set.
So it cuts down a little bit.
Yeah, that's
But
still
it
a lot of.
would require a different conversion library than the API server uses, because the API server relies on that hub and spoke.
And the API server is going to like that's like more complex, right? To like that library does things like preserving fields from newer versions and older versions, and
I'm not sure how much it does automatically, to be honest.
the annotation storage, is that not automatic?
I don't know. I think that might be manual. That I think people might have added manual conversions on top for that. Yeah, we have to go look. It's been really too long since I've looked through that code.
Yeah. That sounds like really hard, and it's going to have to go through like months of API machinery review.
If we still rely on the API machinery, right? So like this, I think we should try to like stay close to that if we can, though, because we shouldn't have our tooling diverging too much from what the components actually do.
And if we have the migration slash conversion on the side of the commands, the components themselves, we don't have this problem
Yes.
with the complications of designing a new, conversion logic.
Right. Yeah. Once it's all hidden behind the binary interface, it's protected. So.
Is it really so bad that our internal type is out in the open? If I wanted to write a different implementation of kubeproxy just cause, like, isn't it kind of good that I can use the internal type?
Maybe. I don't know if it's that big a deal to have it exposed and just like well documented that it's an internal API. You can't, for example, you can't provide the internal type to kubeproxy as a config file. It won't accept it, right? So
yeah, which I mean, if you do that, then you probably didn't. You
just
probably
wouldn't
need
work.
to read a little bit about API conventions.
Right.
And the kubelet is also not going to accept the internal type because there is a slight difference in naming of one of the flags.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just examining the question that like the internal type should live in the mega repo that is Kubernetes. I don't think that that's necessary.
Right.
I don't see an inspiration why that needs to be true.
Right.
I would almost say that we would have an easier time moving the internal types out and then just building around that. But that's my immediate opinion.
I kind of agree with that, honestly.
So then we don't have to change machinery and maintenance is easier.
Right. And you just like, look, this is how these are all the API versions. Here's the library with all the API versions for this component. There's a type in the library too. That's how conversions work.
So we're at the hour here. Sorry, Mike. But do we want to give George a chance to talk? Oh, is George here?
Yeah, let's do that. If people have time, I have time. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
It seems like George is not here at the moment. Were you able to review his legacy flag kubeproxy stuff?
I have not had a chance to review it yet, but we can talk about it.
Oh, and then
Lubomir,
did we just skip over your stuff with the overriding CLI flags?
No problem. So George is here, first of all. I see him in the
Okay,
meeting.
perfect. Sorry.
Yeah, so whatever people want to do, I'm happy. I don't know, George, if you wanted to talk about that PR at all.
Mine is relatively quickly, so.
Real quick, are we going to conflict with SIG cluster lifecycle?
No, this is cluster add-ons right now, which I should be joining, but
I saw Justin join that. Gave me that.
Also, again, sorry, Jorge, I pronounced your name wrong again. It's
Either one.
okay.
Good.
My bad. So, and yeah, is anyone here intending to join the cluster add-ons call?
We can start the cluster add-ons call. So I was actually wondering whether this running over prevents the cluster addons call from starting, but you guys wrap it up, I guess.
Yeah.
Please.
So
Yeah, we got really deep.
we'll move this to next week. Sorry, Jorge.
Yeah.
All right, let's call it. Bye bye.
Quick. Does anyone have any qualms about making next Monday? This is basically the same meeting time that was chosen for this week. Just we have to push it back a week.
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay. I wanted to make sure that you could join that, Mike, because I think you were not available for this Monday.
Great.
Yeah, cool. I'll send out a mailing list invite for that.
All right. Thanks, Lee. Thanks, everyone. Y'all have a great day. Great day.
Bye.